Alexei Petrov, senior ranger of the Northern Taiga Reserve, had walked this trail 1,000 times in all seasons, through the buzzing summers, thick with mosquitoes, through autumns when golden leaves crackled underfoot, through winters so cold the pines themselves seemed to groan. But this morning felt different. The silence was heavy, unnatural, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. Fog lay low along the river bank, drifting like silk across the mossy ground. Pines rose above him like towering pillars of some ancient cathedral, their branches forming a dark vaulted roof. Alexei paused to listen. Not a crow, not a squirrel, not even the distant tapping of a woodpecker, just the faint murmur of the river and his own steady breathing. That was when he saw it. At first he thought the black shape by the water was a fallen tree trunk, smooth, long, glistening in the weak morning light. But as he stepped closer, his boots sinking softly into the damp earth, the shape shifted slightly with the movement of the current. A long, sinuous body, scales reflecting a dull, oily sheen. A snake. A massive snake. Alexei's breath caught in his throat. Even in these remote forests he had never encountered a serpent of this size. Its body stretched nearly 3 meters across the bank, thick as a man's thigh. Motionless except for the gentle push of the river, its head was half submerged in cold water, tongue hanging limp, a sure sign of death. But something about it was wrong. As the fog thinned around the creature, Alexei noticed the bulge, a grotesque swelling that distorted the snake's midsection. It wasn't the typical shape of prey inside a predator. It was uneven, angular, as if whatever was trapped inside was fighting to stay in its own shape, refusing to be consumed. Alexei knelt beside the serpent, placing a gloved hand on its cold scales. They felt strangely warm beneath the chill of the air, as if holding on to the last remnants of life or something else. "What happened to you?" he whispered, though he expected no answer. He glanced around, scanning the fog-shrouded forest for tracks, disturbances, anything that might explain the scene. There were none. Only silence. And the swollen, mysterious body of the serpent lying at his feet, waiting to be opened like a dark, ominous secret. Alexei wiped his palms on his jacket. Though the morning chill had already numbed his fingers, he had skinned wolves, gutted fish, and even assisted in autopsies during his military service, but something about this snake made his stomach coil, tighter than any blade could cut. Still, he reached for his knife. The familiar weight of the hunting blade grounded him, if only slightly. Its steel edge gleamed faintly in the gray, light as he crouched beside the serpent's swollen midsection. The bulge rose like a grotesque hill beneath the smooth scales, stretching the skin nearly to tearing. He pressed the tip against the flesh. A moment of hesitation. The forest felt as though it were watching him, holding its breath. Then Alexei exhaled, steadying his hand, and pushed the blade in. The skin parted with a sickening wet tear. At once a rush of warm steam escaped, hotter than he expected, carrying a thick cloying stench that hit his nose like a blow. Not the smell of decay, not the sour rot of half-digested prey. This was different. Chemical, sharp, like metal and burned herbs mixed together. Alexei gagged, turning his face away as his eyes watered. He widened the incision, slicing carefully along the bulge. The flesh resisted at first, tense and stretched, then finally loosened, spilling out dark fluid that soaked into the moss like ink. His gloved hands worked mechanically, though adrenaline flooded his body with each breath. Something pale appeared beneath the coils of tissue. Fabric? He froze. He slid his hand into the opening, fingers brushing against the unexpected texture, soft, woven, human-made. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled gently, bringing the object into view. A square of cloth, blue, worn, stained but unmistakably crafted by hand. Alexei's pulse quickened. He pulled further, revealing more fabric, tangled and twisted, as if the snake had swallowed it whole or carried it for miles. "What the hell?" he whispered, voice thin. His knife clattered against the log as he used both hands now, widening the cut and dragging out the bundle with deliberate care. Something slipped out and landed with a soft thud on the moss. A tiny boot. A child's boot. Alexei stared at it, breath shallow, a cold sweat forming on his neck. The forest around him seemed to tilt, shifting under the weight of what he had discovered. He had expected an animal, a hare, a fox, anything but this. But the serpent held a secret far more disturbing than prey, and he hadn't even reached the heart of it yet. Alexei stared at the tiny boot lying on the moss as if it might vanish if he blinked. It was no bigger than his palm, brown leather, scuffed, handmade, the kind worn by children in remote Siberian villages. But the nearest settlement was more than 50 kilometers away, and no child should be wandering this far into the taiga. He swallowed hard. The snake couldn't have dragged a child out here, could it? His hands trembled as he returned to the open serpent. The bulge was still firm beneath his palms, whatever lay inside resisting collapse even after the flesh had been cut open. More cloth poked through the slit, patterned, faded, almost doll-like in its colors. He gripped the bundle and pulled. Slowly, something emerged, wrapped in layers of dark blue fabric, tied with fraying thread. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, not the soft weight of a living creature, nor the limp sag of a dead one. Something solid was inside. Alexei set it on the ground and unfolded the fabric with care. The first thing he saw were eyes. Glass eyes. Round, unmoving, a milky blue that caught the dim light. For a heartbeat. He flinched, thinking they belonged to a corpse, but as the rest of the object came free, he realized it was a doll. Hand-stitched, its once bright dress faded to a dull red, patches of stuffing peeking from loose seams. But what truly froze his breath were the symbols. Black ink symbols twisting sharp. Almost runic were drawn across the doll's cloth face, spiraling down its neck and arms like a creeping infection. Some were smeared as if rubbed by motion or water. Others were crisp, deliberate, freshly inked. Alexei had seen markings like these only once before, years ago, carved into the doors of an abandoned settlement deep in the forest, a place villagers refused to speak of, avoided with fear. He never learned their meaning. Now they were here, on a doll swallowed, no, carried by a serpent. His fingers brushed something else tangled in the fabric, a small wooden charm, carved into the shape of an eye. The symbol was familiar, old, ancient, older than any village. The charm pulsed faintly as if warming in his hand. Alexei hissed and dropped it. The warmth vanished instantly, leaving his fingers tingling. Suddenly the forest, so silent moments ago, seemed to lean closer around him, watching, waiting, breathing with him. The doll, the symbols, the charm. This was no accident, no random swallowing. The serpent had been delivering something, a message, or a warning. Alexei wasn't sure which was worse. He stood hunched over the opened serpent, the doll staring blankly up at him with those cold glass eyes. The wooden charm lay where he had dropped it, half buried in moss, as if the forest were already trying to reclaim it. A soft breeze drifted through the trees, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant river water. Then the breeze died. Instantly, the forest slipped back into the same eerie stillness he'd felt earlier, but now it felt heavy, as though the air had thickened into something almost physical. Alexei straightened, his breath forming pale wisps in the cooling air. A faint tremor traveled up his hand. He looked at the charm again. It was glowing. Not bright, just a faint amber pulse like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, ancient. Alexei's stomach knotted. He crouched and picked it up again, expecting the warmth to return. And it did, stronger this time, as if recognizing him. The moment his fingers closed around it, the entire forest changed. The leaves overhead rustled, though there was no wind. The pines groaned, deep and long, like wooden giants waking from slumber. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped, clean, deliberate. Not the careless cracking of an animal. Alexei's pulse quickened. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the mist that clung stubbornly to the forest floor. The fog seemed denser now, curling around tree trunks like pale serpents. Shadows flickered between the pines. Not shapes, not yet, but movement, unmistakable movement. Is someone there? Alexei called out, his voice sounding too loud, too alone. No answer. But the silence that followed felt intentional, expectant. He tightened his grip on the charm. The warmth pulsed through his fingers, spreading up his arm, settling in his chest like a second heartbeat. A presence not hostile, but undeniably aware, seemed to brush against his mind, fleeting as a whisper. The trees shuddered again. The whispering began. Soft at first, a rustle like thousands of voices murmuring from within the bark. Words he couldn't understand. Notes that rose and fell like breathing. Alexei backed away from the serpent's carcass. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But something in the depths of the forest called him forward instead. Gentle, coaxing, ancient. The charm pulsed again. The shadows between the trees thickened. Something was forming there. Not an animal. Not human. Something older. something watching him. And for the first time since he found the snake, Alexei felt truly, deeply afraid. Alexei's breath came in shallow, uneven bursts as he stared into the thickening shadows between the trees. The fog shifted unnaturally, parting as if pulled aside by unseen hands. The warmth of the charm in his fist pulsed like a frantic heartbeat now, echoing the terror rising in his chest. Then the forest lit up. Not with fire, but with light from the charm, which suddenly flared bright enough to bathe the surrounding pines in a warm, amber glow. The light didn't spill outward like normal illumination. Instead, it seemed to ripple through the woods, coating every surface with a strange, shimmering haze. And in that glow, Alexei saw them. Figures. Tall, twisted silhouettes emerged one by one from behind the nearest trees. Their bodies were thin, impossibly long, shaped like trunks of living wood twisted into humanoid forms. Their skin was bark, cracked, ancient, covered in moss. Their arms branched into slender, finger-like twigs. Their heads were hollow knots, dark cavities where faces should be. Forest guardians, spirits, entities whispered of in forgotten stories. Alexei stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the serpent's corpse. His mind scrambled to make sense of what he saw, but the truth was too immense, too primal. These beings were not creatures of myth. They were real. Alive, and surrounding him, one stepped closer. Its hollow face turned toward him, and though it had no eyes, Alexei felt himself being seen, as if every secret, every fear, every memory inside him were being laid bare. The creature raised a branch-like hand, and the trees around them groaned in unison, roots shifting beneath the ground like something deep below was stirring. The doll's symbols, the serpent's journey, the charm warming in his palm. These were not coincidences. The guardian bent its head closer to Alexei. Within the hollow cavity of its face, a faint glow began to pulse, mirroring the charm's rhythm. And then it screamed. The sound was not a noise, but a force, an invisible shock wave that slammed into Alexei's chest, burst through his lungs, crushed his breath. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His voice, his ability to speak, to cry out, was ripped away in an instant. Alexei fell to his knees, clutching his throat, eyes wide with helpless terror. The guardians closed in, surrounding him in a living circle of wood and shadow. The charm dimmed, its last flicker fading as the forest swallowed the light. The serpent had not brought warning. It had not brought fear. It had brought a summons. And now the forest had come to collect.